Wherever you are, make it T-T-T. Truth Frequency Radio.
The book of the revolutions of the luminaries of heaven, according to their respective classes, respective powers, respective periods, respective names, the places where they commenced their progress, and their respective months, which Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, explained to me, he who conducted them, the whole account of them, according to every year of the world forever, until a new work shall be effected, which will be eternal. Chapter 71, verse 1, the book of Enoch, the courses of the heavenly luminaries. Thank you all for taking the time to join me and for being with us this evening here on Secrets Revealed. I'm grateful for your attention and for the trust that you place upon us as far as Sacred Word Publishing and the things that we do. This evening, I'm going to be elaborating on this particular text, this portion of the book of Enoch, which for the longest time was a riddle and something that I could not make sense of. And the reason being and the reason it is even now remains mostly lost knowledge, forgotten prophecy, is because of our embrace of the Copernican worldview and the heliocentric model for understanding the world and the motions of the luminaries and the supposed rotation of the earth as it spins on its axis, as it orbits annually around the sun, which for those of us that have examined the topic of biblical cosmology in great detail, we know this to be a fabrication, and that the earth, according to scripture, is not moving, and that it is the luminaries which move in revolution above it, as we see in the time-lapse photography of the motions, the star trails of the different celestial hosts over the course of an evening. And we see that the heavenly luminaries are not, especially the wandering stars, they're not moving in circle around the sun, but moving with the sun in circle around Polaris. And that it is Polaris which is the fixed point of our universal system, and that all things have been ordered around it. And the reason being, as I expound upon in my work, and especially in my 10th book, The Firmament, Vaulted Dome of the Earth, Polaris is the point that is directly above what Isaiah references as the Mount of the Congregation, that in the very center of the earthen plane there is a mountain referred to as Rupes Negra, and meaning black rock. It is a completely magnetic mountain that, being black and sort of magnetite, it attracts the compasses of the world. And it is why compasses even work, because no matter where you are on the circle of the earth, on the everything will always point towards the north. And the North Pole is where this mountain, this magnetite mountain, is located. And it is also called, as I said, the Mount of the Congregation. And directly above it is where Polaris is located, And being the center of the vaulted dome of the earth, it is the point, the strategic location for the Most High's throne and the heavenly temple. And that Yahuwah had purposely located the heavenly kingdom and his throne there because it is the point from which he can see all things in all directions. And as I reveal in my work, it is also from this point that Lucifer, Satan the adversary, took Yeshua when he took him to an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world. And as we see depicted on the United Nations map of the world, it is from the center point, the North Pole, that all the continental land masses are placed in circle, and that they all spread out in um, in varying length and direction from this particular point. And so it would make sense to me that this would be the place that Yeshua would be taken, and that Satan would, take him to this area so that he could be in the center and all the kingdoms of the world extend in all directions from that outward center. And so, um, this is also what is referred to as the sides of the north, and that the reason it says in Scripture that salvation will come from not the east or the west or the south is because the north is the only direction that does not, it is because the firmament arches from these outward extremities, the outer circle of the earth, and arcs inward until it comes to meet at this pinnacle at the sides of the north, that is the apex, the pinnacle for where God has established his throne room. And this is why we see revealed in Scripture in many places when the apostles and the prophets are taken up to vision and brought before the Most High God, before the presence of Yahuwah and Yeshua and the Holy Spirit, that they see the throne sitting upon a sea of glass, and that this sea of glass is representative of what is the floor of the throne room, but it is also the roof of the vaulted dome of the earth, what Enoch calls the lofty roof. And so I'm going to elaborate somewhat on some of these things. And the reason I want to bring them forth and share them with you now is because of a video that was just recently sent to me by a friend. Many of you know her as Precious Metal, but she's a really good friend of the ministry, has been supporting us in interaction for a very long time. Grateful for the insight that she does share with me at different times. But I posted a link to the show description and included what is a video of the astronomical clock. This is the clock which is located in Switzerland. I believe it's called the Winterberg Celestial Clock, astronomical clock. And when you look at this video, it's in Winterthur, Switzerland. But when you look at the time lapse photography, the time lapse of this particular clock and how it works, it incorporates into it its timekeeping mechanism, the zodiac, and the stars as they circle, and the Earth uh, is in the center because it is the fixed, the uh, geocentrical point for everything else moving. That the Earth doesn't move. The face of the Earth is more or less the backdrop of what would be the clock's face. And I show in the work that I've done, especially in this, um, the book that I wrote when I came to this understanding, was able to then revisit the book of Enoch, the courses on the heavenly luminaries, that I was able to comprehend the intricacies of the motions that Enoch was describing within the 13 or 14 chapters of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And that what we see depicted on the clock's face is what Uriel, the angel Uriel, had shown to Enoch when explaining to him the motions of these various entities, and how it was that the rotations, the revolutions of the sun, the moon, the stars, and also the zodiac, how these motions come together to create the timepiece of the universal clockwork system that is creation. That 124-hour revolution of the sun around Polaris creates what we know as one day. That day is broken up into 24-hour division, and that usually, especially on the equinoxes, day and night are exactly divided into 12-hour portion. And then you have the weeks of the month being um, established, and also the sabbath by the quarterly phases of the moon. And that you have what takes the sun 30 days in average, and that Enoch divides the solar months according to these 30-day divisions, and that there are 12 of them, 12 times 30 being 360, and then you add 4 days for the two equinoxes and the two solstices, and that divides the year into 91-day seasons. But the lunar months are divided alternatively by 29 and 30-day months, because the average synodic cycle of the moon as it goes through its quarterly phases equals 29.5 days. And so there is always in a month this 29 or 30-day unfolding. And that's how the lunar cycle, the months, stay in tune with what is the solar year. And the lunar year is exactly 10 days short of the solar year. And so every 3 years, you add a 13th month, or what the Hebrews call Adar number 2, to the calendar. And this metatonic cycle keeps the lunar and solar calendar in sync together over long periods of time. And so it's a perfect mechanism. And also, God has established so that the zodiac will move 1 degree, I believe, in every 72 years, so that it takes 2,000 plus years to go through one of the signs of the zodiac, and that it's a 25,000 year cycle. Now, I've got all this written down in the Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, because I go through the 12 chapters depending on what, as far as where people say the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries ends. But I go through all of the passages of all of those chapters and explain them in such manner that people can then make sense of the motions that Enoch is attributing for all of these movements: the sun, the moon, um, the stars, the wandering stars, all of them. And Enoch also describes how the different luminaries are categorized and where they sit in the 7 levels of heaven. And these 7 layers or 7 levels are demarcated by the wandering stars. And so the 7 planets of the universe, according to Enoch, are the Sun, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. And these 7 luminaries sit on a different level of what is the 7 levels of heaven, according to Scripture. And I go into great elaboration, so don't feel like you have to take notes or you have to write down any of this information. It's all written down in book form, and it's all linked up to the specific passages in the book of Enoch that um, the different portions of the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which again elaborate on the in great detail of what Enoch calls the greater luminary, which is the sun, and then the lesser luminary, which is the moon, and then the other stars and constellations. What Enoch describes as the celestial host, and the luminaries, the stars. They're not individual suns or what scriptures attributes as being a sun, but they are angelic hosts. And the sun itself is, according to the second book of Enoch, the light of 1,000 angels all meshed together to form what is the brilliance of sunshine. But that the different wandering stars and the stars that make up the constellations, all of them are individual celestial hosts. And so the sun is different than any of the other heavenly luminaries. And, as I said, it is made up in brilliance by the light of 1,000 angels, whereas the other pinpoints of light in the sky, they all are single celestial entities. So if you look at the video, and I'll go ahead and link it to the chat room. Let me actually, I'm opening up the Discord for those that, follow along and keep up with our group chats there. You can find the link on our show description on my Facebook page. And you can also find a link to the video that I'm talking about of the astronomical clock there. And for those that listen to the archives or that aren't near a computer, you can find later, you can find a link to this particular video that I'm talking about, and that I will also link it into the show description. And so after I do this, I will play it and then describe what is being revealed, because it's very complex. And the person that, created it, this particular clock, and you can get replicas of it off of eBay or, like even Amazon. I believe they're like $50. So not that very expensive, and it's a visual representation, and I'm definitely going to get one. I just have not had a chance, but it's a visual representation of what's going on in the heavens daily in keeping up with the mechanism. Let me post it here to the Truth Frequency chat room as well. All right, and so when you look at this video, you will notice that the sun and the moon are traveling together in circle. And the moon, every day, it will lag 50 minutes behind the sun. And so, because the moon is moving slower than the sun, it will every day gain or lose 1/7 portion of its light. And so, it takes over the course of half a month, 15 days, it takes that 15 days for it to become full. Once it reaches lunar conjunctive phase, which is when it is completely void of light. And so it will take the moon this 29.5 days to go through its 4 cycles, its quarterly phases. And the way that God has established the lunar calendar, the monthly calendar, according to the moon and to the sabbath, because Sabbath is dependent upon the phases of the moon. And right now, most people don't celebrate Sabbath in such manner. But when the moon makes its first appearance as a waxing crescent, then every 7 days, its phases determine what Sabbath occurs. Oh my gosh, we're already at first break. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. I want to share really quickly before I go into the movements and the motions and the explanations of them that the chapter headings and why it was that I organized the flat earth as key to decrypt the book of Enoch in this particular manner, because it will kind of expound upon the journey, my journey of awakening to this information, and also um, it will kind of relate the whole awakening that all of us go through when we begin to examine this topic and take it in serious consideration. Because anybody that really truly searches out truth, the truth of this issue, it's very easy to determine that there is no measurable curvature to the earth, nor is it moving at 1,037.541,666,7 miles an hour, as we are told, or that the Earth is moving in orbit around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour, which, if you understand these motions, science basically tells us that the Earth is moving faster than the speed of sound, and also faster than a bullet shot from a 45 caliber gun. That's how fast the motion, 1,037 miles an hour is extremely fast. And yet you step outside and you don't feel, I mean, when you're moving, like you get in an elevator and you're moving at less than a few miles an hour, and yet you can feel that motion. And when you're driving down a highway and you stick your arm out the window, you think you feel 60 miles an hour of accelerating through the atmosphere. You feel that draft. It's easy to determine that you're moving quickly at high speed. But again, when we're supposed to believe that we're moving at 1,037 miles an hour, and yet we don't feel that motion. I mean, it's ludicrous. And for the globe proponents who say that the atmosphere moves with the earth and that's why you don't feel it, well, we know that that's not true either, because we see that the storm systems, like even this evening, in the afternoons, we have storm systems gathering, and we can see them moving from, usually storms will move from the west to the east. Here in America, anyways, that um, the jet stream and the storm production, they follow the mountain chain of what even creates the Grand Canyon. Those mountains that extend from Alaska all the way down to the very tip of South America. That these mountains uh, drive and maneuver the winds as the sun moves in circle above the face of the earth. That where the heat and the interaction of the sun's light with both the land and also the oceans, that it creates, it's the condensation and the evaporation which creates these high and low pressure systems, and that this is what channels weather. And depending upon this precipitation, that's how the storm systems are gathered and collected, and from which direction they will come. And here in Atlanta, our usual weather patterns are that these storms will come from the west, follow the Rocky Mountains until, Texas, and that's where the mountains, there's a break there in the mountains, and the weather systems will then go across the eastern, across the United States to the east, and then move out into the Atlantic. And so that's how our systems usually arrive, are from the west. But when we have a tropical depression and storm patterns out in the Atlantic Ocean, the um, hurricane, or during hurricane system season, we have storms come up from the south, and a lot of times they will be from the south and moving towards the northwest or the northeast, depending upon the rotation of those storms as they come from uh, Africa and then are channeled through the Bahamas and the panhandle of what is the Central Americas and Mexico. That creates a spin on the rotation of the air masses, which generate and drive the weather and the storm systems from the south up into the Americas, and north, in a northwesterly, north or northeasterly motion. And then sometimes awkwardly, we will even have um, weather patterns, where these systems come in from the east and are driven towards the west. But those are only when, again, we have these tropical depressions out in the Caribbean or near the Bahamas, and the weather patterns are such that um, they come into the land, into the continental United States in that manner. And so storm patterns can come from every direction. And we often see that, these with these polar vortexes, especially in the winter, that storms will travel from the north down southward. And so all of that again is dependent upon where the sun is in its motions between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and how it interacts with both the land and the oceans, creating the condensation and evaporation, which, you know, drives storm production, and also um, the rainstorms when rain comes down from the skies. And so that's what's described in great detail also in the book of Enoch, where it speaks about the winds and the temperatures as controlled by those winds. But, anyways, really quickly, back to the different chapters. In chapter 1, I opened with why the study of the flat earth is important. Chapter 2, the lost and forbidden knowledge, and why I think the Most High God is revealing this knowledge now. Chapter 3 is on the ancient Hebrew lunar solar calendar, and how it is that Sabbath and also the Levitical feast days are connected to this calendar system. And in chapter 4, God's calendar explained, kind of what I went through during the early part of the show. Chapter 5, the Leviticus 23 holy days, what we call holidays, but we don't celebrate these correctly anymore because most people do not determine the month and the weeks by the phases of the moon, which is how God has established the reckoning of the week and the month is according to the lunar cycles. And so, in order to understand how the weeks and the months unfold, one must determine them by the phases of the moon. And when you do so, then you get on God's time. And you understand how he's ordered it to unveil when we should celebrate the Levitical holy days. Because Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, um, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and also the Feast of Tabernacles are spring and fall feasts which align with the uh, phases, especially the full moon. The 15th, which is the unleavened bread, Nisan 15, and Tishri 15, which is the seventh Hebrew month. Those those 7-day festivals always begin on the full moon Sabbath and continue till the third quarter Sabbath moon. And it's always that way. And so if you want to be in alignment with the God's determination for when to celebrate the Levitical feast days, you have to keep track of time as a portion and regulated by the quarterly phases of the moon, which is something we explain in great detail in our Enochian calendar that we have created. And also, I want to state here that um, it is difficult to forecast an entire year according to the movements of the heavenly luminaries. And so, if the calendars that we have created are not precise for where you may be living, all you have to do is find out when and determine when Kadesh occurs for you, wherever you are in the world. And then you establish your Sabbath according to the sighting of the waxing crescent moon, which even tonight, this is the when the moon is 3 to 4% full. So it should be tomorrow that it makes its first appearance. And so tomorrow will be um, the first day of the next lunar month. And so um, the first of Elui, which is the month of August, and then you have Tishri. And so the first day of the Hebrew month of Elui, Elui, should begin tomorrow. And then you will determine your Sabbath according to the sighting of the waxing crescent. Now, whether it made appearance tonight or not, I'm not certain. It was rainy here, so we're not able to look for the sign of the waxing crescent. But usually it has to be a little more than 3% full to be um, visible. And so that's why I say that probably tomorrow will be the first appearance of the waxing crescent. But for some people, it may have occurred tonight. But, anyways, if you purchase our calendar, all you have to do is align to realign it if indeed any of the months are wrong. All you have to do is determine where Kadesh is located on the calendar, and when you see the waxing crescent, then you keep up with the track of time as far as the Sabbath. Because as I stated, these Sabbaths are aligned to the first quarter full, third quarter, and the lunar conjunctive moon. And the first day of every lunar month begins with the sighting of the waxing crescent moon. That is always the first day. And that day is excluded from the following 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so it's easy to keep up with Sabbath according to the phases of the moon. And then it also makes sense as to why God had created the moon with its quarterly phases to determine when Sabbath is to be celebrated. All right, continuing with the chapters. And so, chapter 6 is the new covenant, where I talk about, the New Testament, the coming of Christ, and how he fulfilled the law, not that he came to do away with it, but that his incarnation into flesh and also his second coming, his second advent, they will um, they will fulfill the remaining 3 fall feasts, but that the spring and summer feasts have already been fulfilled by his first coming. He was the Passover lamb, he was entombed on unleavened bread, and he was resurrected for first fruits. He was the high priest. Adam and his descendants were the resurrected first fruits. And then 40 days after his resurrection, the Holy Spirit came upon the apostles and they spake in tongues. He will come again, the second advent, his return. He will come on the Feast of Trumpets, that the trumpet, the seventh trump, will be sounded on the Feast of Trumpets, and the angel will announce that the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord. The wrath of God then will be poured out on the wicked and those not written into the books of life. And then on the Day of Atonement, everybody will be brought and before him for judgment. And that will be the harvest. And the tares gathered for burning and the wheat for preservation, it is after the judgment, the great white throne judgment, and the determination of whether we are worthy to be numbered with the elect and counted with uh, the righteous, that on the Feast of Tabernacle, the New Jerusalem will descend out of the heavens, and those that are worthy will be baptized and enter therein. And so, as I said, Christ came to fulfill the Father's word and not to do away with it. All right, chapter 7 is Enoch's dream vision, where I explain the enmity between the seed lines. Chapter 8 is the worship of the Father and the Son and how you can do that. I explained that everybody should have an altar, either in their house or outside of their house, and that you should offer, flour, wine, nuts, um, even real flowers, things like that. You can offer incense or even white sage, things like that on the altar. And I used to believe, and I describe in the book, that we should point our altars towards the east, towards Jerusalem, but we have since reconfigured our altar to face the north, because I know that that is the direction of the heavenly temple, and that the Most High is seated there on the center of the vaulted dome. And so I believe now that altars should be faced towards the north, which is where the Mount of the Congregation is, and where the Most High has established the heavenly temple. All right, continuing. Chapter 9, the naming of the days of the week and how, the weeks are basically pagan names, and they are representative of the wandering stars. And it's interesting that the earth is not included in the worship, of the days or the naming of the days. And it's because the wandering stars and the luminaries are something different from what is the earth, that the earth was never considered a luminary or a celestial host. Chapter 10, Flat Earth Bible Codes, and how it was that I found confirmation of this knowledge in the Bible codes. Chapter 11 is my explanation of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22 on the circle of the earth. Chapter 12 is Strong's Concordance translation of Isaiah 40, the entire chapter. Chapter 13 is the verse meaning for Isaiah 40:22 as deciphered by the Strongs and the original Hebrew language. Chapter 14 is the tabernacle of the sun and how it is that the scriptures affirm that it is the sun which moves in the sky and not the earth, which is also the reason why when God wanted Joshua to elongate the day so that he could continue his slaughter of the of Amalek and the giants and the children of Canaan, that he commanded the sun and the moon to stand still and not the earth, because it's not the earth moving in rotation that determines or creates the sun setting or rising in the sky. And so this is also affirmed by Isaiah chapter 38 and Second Chronicles, where Hezekiah is given a sign and the sun goes back 10 degrees on the sundial, that God simply reversed its course, and that if it was the earth which spinning caused the sun to go down, the earth would have had to have been stopped in its motion, reversed course, and then allowed to continue in its normal spin. Which, if you did that, can you imagine how the oceans and everything would have been sloshed to such degree that it would have spilled over out of its containment and created huge tsunamis and floods and destroyed so many people's lives. And yet, none of that is mentioned in Scripture. There were no repercussions to the sun's motion being stopped and reversed, which again shows you, in my opinion, that it is the sun which moves in circle above the face of the earth, as is asserted in the book of Enoch and in Clement chapter 20 and many other places, which I'll list in my work, but and not the earth moving, which again causes the sun to go down. And this is also why, yes, I'll answer that question in just a minute. Regular Girl asks if I know what an astrolabe is. And it's a very interesting because the astrolabe works just like what the astronomical clock in Switzerland, how it works, and what Enoch describes from the motions. And so I'll elaborate more on that when we return from break. It's good to see you, Wookie, and Angry Bird, and Tech, and everybody in the chat room. And all those in Discord, we appreciate all of you as well. So I'll get into this more when we come back from break. Um, Time is going by so very quickly, but anyways, in chapter 15 is when I start to explain the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. All right, we'll be right back, everyone, for a second hour. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. Time just goes by so very quickly. And I know that it takes, some time for me to be able to explain these things, but it's just, time just goes by so fast. The shows end so quickly, and it doesn't even seem like I covered a whole lot. But all right, and so back really quickly to the fullness of the, because we just reached section 2, and it is in section 2 that I have the beginning of my explanation and my decryption of the book of Enoch's book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And so chapter 15 begins with the decryption of the motions of the great luminary. Chapter 16 is where I explain how the seasons, the zodiac, and the phases of the moon, that if the earth were moving in circle around the sun, that there's no way that the motions depicted there could remain constant, and that the even the hours of daylight, uh, that they would remain the same over the course of a year. Think about it. If the earth is moving in circle around the sun, in 6 months it would be completely on the opposite side of the sun in its, you know, movement, in its motion around, circling around it. And supposedly that it is the quarterly cycles of this orbital rotation that causes the seasons. But yet, think about this. If in 6 months we're on the exact opposite side of the sun in our annual orbit, why is it that night and day, I mean, because the daylight and nighttime should absolutely shift, but we don't see that in the daylight savings or in the way that they shift time for daylight savings. Daylight savings is just shifted an hour here and there for what are uh, the when the day and the nights are elongating, and that's because the sun is moving back and forth between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and that's what creates the seasons, not the Earth moving around the sun. And we see, according to what occurs in the skies, that this is exactly what happens. And Enoch describes this in great detail as far as the motions of the sun and the moon as they are moving through the six gates of heaven that Enoch describes. And so there's no way that if the earth is moving around the sun is moving around the center of the Milky Way, and the Milky Way as galaxy is moving around some other grand universal center, that the parallax we see, the motions of the stars and what stars are available to be seen every night can be the same, because all those other stars have to be moving in opposite directions, being part of other galaxies. How is it that we see everything in similar fashion and that it's all remained the same over thousands of years if all of these motions are taking place at once? There's no way. It would be impossible. And so, also with the way that the phases of the moon occur over a month, and that every month is similar, it shows to us that the revolution of the moon for every month has to be similar, and that if the earth were moving in orbit around the sun, every season and even every night, the phases of the moon would alter slightly, and they could never remain the same over the passing of a month. Because according to where the earth is in its movement around the sun over the course of a year, the light and where it receives that light, and the moon as it's supposedly moving in synchronous orbit with that of the earth, all of that would shift. And so the phases and the seasons, when we receive day and night, all that should shift as well. But the fact that it doesn't affirms that we must be under some kind of other cosmology. And the only way to explain it is by understanding that the earth is motionless, it's the foundation for the heavens, and that the all the other luminaries are moving in circle above it, in the skies above it. And once you understand that, you not only understand what Enoch is describing in this book, but you also understand the creation and the movement of the luminaries in creating what is the larger clockwork mechanism of the creation. Because as I said, everything has been ordered precisely so that some aspect of the motions of the sun, the moon, and the stars are what create the cycles of time. Chapter 17 is the first law of the luminaries, and it has to do with um, everything about the sun and its movements. And in chapter 18, I speak about in regard to the heavenly luminaries maintaining course. And I detail how, in my opinion, that the luminaries are intelligent beings, especially the sun, because the sun has to, over the course of its annual movement back and forth between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, it has to increase and also slow down its speed so that every daily revolution is altered a little bit slightly from what was its previous daily revolution and speed, that its velocity is constantly changing, which depicts intelligence. And either the Most High God is slowing it and speeding it up over the course of the year, or the sun and the luminaries, the angels, which lighten it and create its luminosity, they do it of their own volition, having been appointed to regulate such time. And in my opinion, this is what the book of Enoch describes, because he describes also the 7 wandering stars that were the planets that, not coming forth in their time, they have been bound up. And these 7 stars, which used to be, in my opinion, the planets that they lost their, because they didn't come forth in their time, that they lost their position in the celestial heavens, and that they are now bound and other stars have replaced them. That God appointed other angels to represent those luminous luminous bodies, the 7 planets, and that they maintain their motion according to what God commanded them. And so, again, in my opinion, this shows that the stars are intelligent beings, and that the luminaries have been instructed to come forth in certain time according to the motions that God has established for them. All right, continuing. Chapter 19 is the flat earth occult knowledge, which I absolutely believe it is, and that the elites and the secret societies and the Freemasons, that they understand the true shape of the earth and the true orientation of the continental land masses around the North Pole as center of the earthen plane, and that they have revealed this on not only the United Nations flag, which shows the azimuthal equidistant projection map and the orientation of the Earth as a flat, motionless plane. And in my opinion, also the square and compass. It shows to us that God established, he inscribed upon the waters of the deep and established a circular boundary where the circle of the earth is enclosed by a high mountain range, and that this mountain range contains the basin of what is a concave earth, that the earth is, and the oceans are contained in a basin, and that the basin is what divides the waters and sea level from dry land. And so this is the distinction between what has become dry land and where the waters of the ocean meet to form the beaches, and where the lakes and the rivers and all of that, the seas, all of that is contained as part of the larger body of water that is, what's it referred to as, Oceanus. That is the mythological name for the body of the water, all together as one. And I explain all of this too in the book as well. And it's specifically in the firmament, vaulted dome of the earth, and paradise sides of the north, and the mouth of the congregation. I go into great detail in explaining the cosmology. And also, when I present at the Flat Earth Conference, I will be answering a lot of what are the most frequently asked questions on biblical cosmology, and helping people to make sense of all of these things with regard to the seasons, the equinoxes, the solstices, how all that is created. the interactions of the earth, the atmosphere. In chapter 21 is, oh, wait, chapter 20, the great luminary and the gates of heaven. I decrypt the book of Enoch's, the motions on the great luminary, and how he describes, for instance, I'll give you an example. From the book of Enoch, he describes that in chapter 71, verse 8, the sun sets in heaven and returning by the north to proceed towards the east is conducted so as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. So Enoch describes, as far as the motions of the sun and the moon through these gates of heaven, he describes that the luminaries move from east to west and then back north and then back east to get to where they started, which is a circle. And so this circular revolution, which is exactly what we see as far as star trails of the motions of the luminaries over the course of an evening, that this is exactly what he describes. And so I break all that down in this chapter. Okay, chapter 21 is the beginning of the lesser luminary and the explanation of the motions of the moon and its quarterly phases and how that determines the Sabbath and the Levitical feast days. Chapter 22 is the order of creation in the first 4 days of what unfolded. Because remember, in scripture, the earth and the heavens were created before the firmament on the second day and before the dry land was elevated above the sea level on the third day, and before the heavenly luminaries, the sun, the moon, and the other stars were created and placed into the firmament on the fourth day. And so the earth is older than the sun. But according to the scientific model for planetary accretion and how solar systems came to be, it was the movement, the spin, and the rotation of the sun which caused the planets to, at different distances, to coalesce and to create their own spin so that they moved in orbit around the sun. And yet, according to scripture, the sun didn't even exist until the fourth day. And so, how is it that the earth came to be? And, you know, if it pre existed before the sun, it doesn't make sense. And the whole scientific model for explaining the way that the earth and other planets and even the solar system came into being, all that can be thrown out the window. And if the earth was here before the sun and the moon, well, then what was it doing just, you know, in the universe? What was it doing? Was it just floating through space with no direction and nothing to guide it and nothing to direct it? What then placed it into order? And so these things have to be considered when you read the story of Genesis and the timeline for the ordering of creation, which again is the chapter and the prophecy where God himself reveals how he established all things. And the Big Bang and the heliocentric model, the Copernican model for explaining the universe, it does not jive with the Word of God. And so you either stand with NASA and its lies and deceptions, or you stand with God and the gospel and the revealing, the revelations that He has placed within it to explain these things. Chapter 23 is the earth really moving? Chapter 24, visible proofs of a stationary earth? Chapter 25, this is the third portion of the book. And here's where I go into the moon and the other stars and what their motions in the zodiac, how it represents the greater year, what is called the great year. So chapter 25 is to rule the night. Chapter 26, the ministers of heaven, which are the different constellations that are the leaders of the zodiac, the 12 constellations comprising the zodiac. They're called the ministers of heaven. Chapter 27 is the winds of heaven, and how it is that the winds, in following after the heat of the sun and the sun's motion back and forth between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, because we see that on the winter solstice, the sun will be at its furthest southern point in the skies, and then it will reverse course and begin moving back towards the north. And over 3 months, 91 days, will reach the equator and divide the day and the night into 12-hour segments. And then moving for 91 days towards the north and what is the Tropic of Cancer, it will reach its northern extreme for the summer solstice. And this is when we see the phenomena of the midnight sun, that indeed the sun is circling in our skies, and that during this time, people can witness it doing this circling motion because its orbital motion, its revolution above the face of the earth will be so compacted and so short that it will remain above the horizon so that you can see it moving in circle from east to west and north and back to the east. And it will remain above the horizon for several days, proving and affirming that indeed the sun is moving in a circle above the face of the earth. Chapter 28 is the two great luminaries. Chapter 29 is the prophetic implications of the book of Enoch. Chapter 30 is the righteous wheat and the wicked tares. Chapter 31 is the flat earth's connection to God's calendar. And chapter 32 are the flat earth poems that I wrote when I first came to knowledge of the importance of this revelation. And then I end the book. And so now I'm going to explain the motions that we see on this astronomical clock and how it is. And I'm going to explain it to you from what all of you can plainly see by going outside and watching the sunset on your horizon, no matter where you are, every evening over the course of a year. And so we'll explain it as Enoch sees it. All right, so if you go outside of your house and you're facing the western skies, which is where the sun sets every evening, Enoch describes the motions of the sun beginning when it is on the fourth gate. And the fourth and the third gate are where the equator is, because the equator is between these two segments, these two portals, what Enoch calls the third and the fourth gate of heaven. And so he says, and in the fourth gate through which the sun with the moon proceeds, in the first part of it, there are 12 open windows from which issues out a flame when they are opened in their proper periods. When the sun rises in heaven, oh my goodness, it's already another segment. All right, we'll be right back for final portion. All right, welcome back everybody to the final segment. It has really gone by very quickly, and so let me go ahead and get into it before we run out of time, and this will explain, and you'll be able to visualize this as well. And so Enoch describes when the sun rises in heaven, it goes forth through this fourth gate 30 days, and by the fourth gate in the west of heaven on a level with it descends. During that period, the day is lengthened from the day, and the night curtailed from the night for 30 days. And then the day is longer by 2 parts than the night. The day is precisely 10 parts, and the night is 8. And so, what he's describing is that the sun, once it crosses the equator, that it will begin to move into northern latitudes, and it will every day slow its revolution down. And for 30 days, each of these 30-day segments, it will go through the 3 gates which divide the equator and the Tropic of Cancer. And so imagine you're outside and you're looking towards the western skies. On this day, the vernal equinox, you will see the sun set exactly in the middle of what will be its northern and southern extreme. And for these 90 days, it will move slowly, incrementally northward. And then on that 91st day, which is the summer solstice on June 21st, usually about thereabouts, it will reach its northern limit. That will be the longest day of the year. The night will be the day will be twice as long as the night. Enoch describes this as when the sun reaches the 6th gate. So I'll read that to you. And the sun returns towards the east, entering the 6th gate, where it rises and sets for 30 days. When that period is completed, the day becomes shortened precisely 1 part, so that it is 11 parts, while the night is 7 parts. And so now Enoch is describing the sun moving from the 6th gate down southward back towards the equator. Let me also just share with you when it reaches its extreme. Okay, here's where it reaches the summer solstice and where it arrives on the Tropic of Cancer. And so it will always, when it reaches either the equator or the northern or southern limits, Enoch will describe this as 31 days, this segment. And so here, when it reaches the Tropic of Cancer, that 31st day, that one day, that is the summer solstice. And so, as I said, he divides the motion of the sun 30 days each going through these 3 gates. And so each season is divided by 90 days. And then the one day for the summer solstices for the summer and winter solstice and the vernal and autumnal equinox. And so he says, the sun now returns to the east, entering into the sixth gate and rising and setting in the sixth gate 31 days on account of its signs. At that period, the day is longer than the night, being twice as long as the night, and becomes 12 parts. But the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts. Then the sun rises up that the day may be shortened and the night lengthened. And so once the sun reaches the Cancer, the Tropic of Cancer, that is summer solstice. That's when you can see the phenomena, the midnight sun. It's doing its shortest revolution. It's closest to the center of the uh, Earth's plane, the North Pole, and it's at its northern extreme. And so then at that point, you will see the sunset at its furthest point north on your horizon. If you go out on June 21st, you will see the sun at its most northern, that will be to your right. It will be the furthest it will reach towards the right on the horizon. And then for 90 days, as it begins to move southward again, and the sun will be located over the northern climates, the northern latitudes. That's why we have spring. Spring is when the sun reaches, it crosses the equator and begins to move across the northern uh, lands, those closest to the North Pole and the inner circle of the Earth's plane. And when the sun again reaches the Tropic of Cancer, that begins summer. And the reason it begins summer is because now the sun's going to start heading southward and moving towards the left, and will be returning back across northern latitudes as it heads towards the equator. So because it is um, moving back and forth above the northern climates and the northern latitudes, that's what creates our spring and summer. And in southern latitudes, for instance, Brazil and southern Africa and Australia, that is when they have their fall and their winter. Um, fall being when our spring, when it crosses the equator, that's their fall. And then when the sun begins to come back down this way, they they are at their coldest because the sun is the furthest away from them. And so and the opposite happens once the sun reaches the equator again. When it reaches the equator again, it reaches the fourth gate of heaven. Enoch describes how the sun and the moon, the sun, the day and the night become equal 12 hours, just like when it reached the equator for the beginning of spring. Now it rises on the equator again for the beginning of fall. And so what creates our fall is when the sun crosses the equator and begins to move towards southern latitudes. And because it's no longer above us, but is moving away from us, that's what creates spring in the southern latitudes. And that's what creates fall here in the northern latitudes. And so when it begins moving towards the left and moving away from us, but above the southern latitudes, that's what creates their spring. And so when the sun moves from the equator to the Tropic of Capricorn and moves through the third, the second, and the first gates of heaven, it is above the Tropic of Capricorn for what is the winter solstice. And the winter solstice is what is when it reaches its southern extreme. So if you go outside of your house and watch the sunset for what will be for us the shortest day of the year, because the sun is further from us and those that live above the equator, um, that will be the night will be longer than the day, and that's why it's so much colder during the fall and the winter, because the days are getting shorter and the land is cooling off each day that the sun is away from us. And so when it reaches its southern limit, it will be on the Tropic of Capricorn. It will then reverse course and begin heading back up towards the equator, which is right. It will be moving towards the right again until it reaches the point where it is on the equator and divides the night and the day into equal 12-hour portions. And so fall and winter, fall is when the sun crosses the equator and begins moving towards the Tropic of Capricorn. When it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn, that begins our winter because the sun is the furthest away from us. And then it will take 3 months until it arrives back at the equator and then starts moving back towards the northern climates and begins to warm the land here where we are. And so that's how the seasons are created. And that's how Enoch describes the motions of the sun back and forth between these six gates. And that's what creates the seasons. So you can see that it is the sun moving back and forth between these 2 points that creates the seasons. And so if you are outside and you're looking up, again, no matter where you are on the circle of the earth, if you are in northern latitudes, you will see the sun uh, from March to June and then to September. The sun will be creating spring and summer for those in northern climates. And it will move from the center of on the horizon for the equator. It will move to the right to its northern extreme. And then on the tropic, when it reaches the Tropic of Cancer for the summer solstice, it will begin moving back towards the left. And then it will arrive at the median, the central point, which is the equator. And then it will begin moving towards and far away from northern latitudes and towards this south, what is the left, if you're looking towards the western horizon. It will begin moving to the left for 91 days until it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn for the winter solstice. And again, that will be the southern limit, the extreme southern, and that will be for us the shortest day of the year, but for people in the southern latitudes, that will be their longest day of the year. And so it's vice versa. Um, for people that live on the left or the right side of the equator, the seasons are flip flopped. And I do believe that even the celebration of Passover for people in southern latitudes, that they should determine it according to, their spring and summer should be opposite of that of ours, and that they should celebrate spring because the barley will begin increasing once the sun begins to move into southern latitudes, and so their Passover should be lined according to when their spring is, in my opinion. That if people want to be correct with the way that God has established the calendar according to the harvest and to the crops that come into season, that all of that is determined by the movement of the sun as it dances back and forth between these two extremes. And then, with regard to the moon, as I said, the moon circles in accordance with the sun, except for it moves a little bit slower, and it lags 50 minutes behind the sun every day. And so over the course of 29 and a half days, the moon will be delayed by this 50-minute daily portion, and that's what causes it to go through its phases, where it will take 14 days after it first makes an appearance in the skies for it to become full of light, or what is, the full moon. And then it will take another 14 days for it to move to the point where it is completely void of light. And these two 14-day segments are divided by two 7-day periods, which the quarterly phases again are what determine the Sabbath. And so when you're standing outside and you're looking towards the western skies, on the night of the lunar conjunction, the sun and the moon will set exactly at the same time. And then the very next day, when the moon makes its first appearance in as a thin waxing crescent, it will be it will first appear a little bit after sunset for just a short time, and then will set right behind the sun. And then every day it will, begin to move towards the right in the skies. And you'll see um, the moon begin to lag towards the right until when the sun sets, um, it will be exactly to your right at a 90-degree angle for what is the first quarter moon. And that is the first Sabbath. And then 7 days later, when the sun sets, the moon will be exactly opposite of the sun, and will, as the sun is setting in the western skies, it will be rising in the eastern skies and be directly across from it. And it will rise about 12 hours after the sun sets. And then um, for the next 7 days, instead of rising in the east, the sun, when it sets in the west, the moon will make its appearance in the southern skies for what is the third quarter moon. And it will set 18 hours after sunset. So it will be, instead of 6 hours behind for the first quarter moon, it will be 6 hours before the sunset. And then, as for a third quarter to lunar conjunctive moon, the moon will make its appearance in the western skies until it sets exactly with the sun when it is not visible. And so that's how the moon also circles around us, creating the phases and also the Sabbaths. And when you look into the skies, that's how you can also determine direction. Because where the sun sets, and depending on the phases of the moon, you can determine which direction you are looking. If you spot the first quarter moon in the skies, you know you're facing um, north, because it will be facing the north 6 hours after sunset. And then when the moon is full, it will rise in the eastern skies exactly 12 hours after sunset. So you know when it's sunset and you see the moon rise that you're facing east. And when the moon makes an appearance as a third quarter moon 6 hours before the sun sets, that you are facing south. And you will only see the third quarter moon during the evening, the late evening or the morning hours. And then, as I said, as it begins to move from third quarter to fourth quarter or lunar conjunctive moon, you will see the moon in the western skies. And so that's how you can always determine direction. That's how the navigators use the luminaries to determine direction and to understand which way they were going during the night or the day. And, and God has it ordered perfectly so that you can not only tell the passing of time and how the clockwork mechanism of creation has been established by the Most High God, but also which direction you are facing when you see the luminaries at certain times in the evening. And so really it's an incredible system, and it only makes sense when you understand that the earth is the basis, the foundation for the luminaries created above it. And that these motions occur because the sun and the moon and the other luminaries are moving in circle above the face of the earth. And the earth is not moving at all. We live in a geocentric world. The earth is the foundation for the heavens, and Sheol is the seven layers which descend down into the interior of the earth. But the earth is the plane where the heavens and hell come together. It's the meeting of the spiritual and the material worlds. And this is why we see here on the earth the conjunction of light and darkness, imperishability with perishability, good and evil, all those things as Enoch describes them. All right, let's see here. This is the final quote I'd like to leave all of you with, because it says here, when Enoch concludes, respecting them, men greatly err, for these luminaries truly serve in the dwelling place of the world. One day in the first gate, one day in the third gate, one gate in the fourth gate, and one in the sixth gate. He's talking about here the summer solstices and the equinoxes. And the harmony of the world becomes complete every 364 fourth state of it. For the signs, the seasons, the years, and the days, Uriel showed me the angel whom the Lord appointed over all the luminaries of heaven, and in the world, that they might rule in the face of the sky, and appearing over the earth become conductors of the days and the nights, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the ministers of heaven, which make their circuit with all the chariots of heaven. Thus Uriel showed me 12 gates open for the circuit of the chariots of the sun in heaven, from which the rays of the sun shoot forth. And so the sun and the moon, they move through these 12 signs of the zodiac, and they spin in circle, again, as we see shown by the midnight sun. and also by um, the star trails of the motions of the stars over the course of an evening, how they all move in circle around Polaris. That Polaris is the one fixed star which, not moving, shows the center, the pivot for all the rest of the heavens and the motions of the celestial host. And so the planets, they don't move in circle around the sun. They move with the sun in circle around Polaris. And so the whole cosmology and the understanding of the planetary system and the supposed Earth moving in circle around the sun and the sun moving around the center of the Milky Way and the Milky Way moving around this galactic black hole center, all that is complete bunk. None of those motions are occurring. The Earth does not move, and all the other luminaries move above it. The sun, nothing moves around the sun. The sun moves in circle, just like the moon and all the other luminaries around Polaris. All right, God bless all. Good night.